I want to come back to, and apologies, I've the responsibility to attend the two committees at the same time, and I always wonder how I'm meant to do that. But so if I missed your answer, I apologise. I heard the figure that about 5% of overall complaints were fully investigated. You might clarify that figure for me.
That was a figure, Deputy, that I gave, which was kind of a general, it wasn't a GSOC figure, it was just a general figure in this jurisdiction for complaints from members of the public to ombudsman institutions. Generally, it falls somewhere between 3 to 5%. So we're not obliged to investigate everything, but that's
of
generally
course, and you'll get all different quality of complaints. Yeah. What is that figure for GSOC?
Well, of the 2,189 complaints that we received last year, 858 or 39% were not admitted. 1,332 were admitted and were subject to investigation. Now, some of those will have not have gone very far because complaints don't engage, or we find very early on that there's good reason. But approximately 60% of the complaints received last year were opened as investigations in GSOC.
Okay, and I suppose it's difficult for us to, comment on specific cases, particularly ones that are active. And I suppose what we like to do is maybe comment on patterns that we see. I suppose in general, the delay in the service, in your ability to investigate, often has a compounding impact on people who perceive that they are victims. In some cases, it will be proved that they were victims, that almost has, it's a hard thing to say, but sometimes people would say that it is a harder hit, the delay in GSOC, than the original incident, because they've already been let down by one section of the state, and the body responsible for ensuring that doesn't happen also lets them down by virtue of the length of the delay. And so, do you appreciate the impact that has? And secondly, is this down to resources? Is this something that we should be going to ministers and saying you need to be giving GSOC more resources?
There are two key reasons for it, Deputy, and just to say to you that we share the public's frustration. Like, we're not sitting here defending the timeliness. We have. I
suppose the question is, how do we fix it?
There are two ways of fixing it. The first is the current legislation is overly complicated in terms of process. The new legislation, the draft, will simplify the process, and we would have confidence that it will make it more efficient. And the second is resources. It's back to Deputy Murphy's question of capability of the staff. We're putting in a lot of investment into training, to learning and development, to create an organisation where people
so what's the figure?
To do it.
What's the figure that allows you have a reasonable response to queries?
Well, this year we've been given an additional 22 staff to put into our investigation team. The long-term figure very much depends on the complexity of the legislation or what the Oireachtas are going to ask us to do, but we need more than we have now.
I suppose the question is, can I crystallise your ask?
I wish you could, and I wish we could give you a definitive answer to that. At the moment, it very much...
Well, let's put it differently. To clear the backlog you have at the moment, what resources would you need?
I really think it's very difficult, Deputy. I mean, we've 12% up on last year, so our complaints are rising all the time. I think the complexity and nature of our complaints is changing, so we are seeing more and more challenging criminal investigations.
No, I accept it, Mr. Hume, but I hear you saying it's not acceptable. We're all saying it's not acceptable, okay? It's government's job to try and resolve problems. So, as a government TD, I'm saying to you, how do we resolve the problem? How much more staff do you need? What asks have you made of the department? And I suppose it's hard to accept your view that it's unacceptable to have these delays without seeing you respond and say, I need X staff. And I appreciate that there's internal civil service politics and all that, but it's very difficult to appreciate that you want to resolve this if we're not crystallising the ask. Well, do you see my frustration?
Yeah, we do understand that, and it's not an unreasonable question to ask how many staff do you require, and it must be very frustrating not to get an answer. But the reality of the situation is, to give you an example, we have a vacancy in a senior position in the organisation since last September. The recruitment process began as soon as that vacancy arose. and it's not going to be possible to fill that until the end of next month. So you're looking at a 9-month delay in actually recruiting one person. Now, the whole regulatory business in Ireland, and the public sector and the private sector, has blossomed or exploded, if you like, over the past few years. So when we're looking for investigative staff, because those are the crucial people, they're not the only people, but they're the crucial people. You're looking for expertise in a very limited pool, and other people are fishing in this pool. And to be perfectly honest, we can't compete with the private sector.
Well, can I put it this way, because I'm anxious to move on to a different topic. I suppose when you're with us again, if there are similar delays, I suppose it will be harder to accept your response if you haven't made a clear ask to ministers, to the department, and to the system. And I'll leave it at that. I'm very anxious to talk about children. So cases which you deal with that involve those under 18. And I'm very anxious, I suppose, because any sort of attack or assault on a child is utterly unacceptable in our society. But for it to be perpetrated by a member of An Garda Síochána, I suppose, is particularly unacceptable. So my question is there a specific policy or piece of work which you've done which includes assaults by members of the Gardaí on children? That's the first question. The second question is there different procedures for dealing with children in investigative cases? And the third question is, I have had some reports where children are questioned. So these are people who are making a complaint and they're questioned with no advocate present. So no member of their family, no solicitor, and yet the person whose the complaint is being made about would obviously have somebody there. And I would imagine for a young person under 18, that's a very intimidating situation to be in on their own, and I'd be surprised if that is a procedure that you have for a complainant. Perhaps it might be different for someone who's the subject of abuse or in that area, but for a complainant of an assault. So it really relates around children, and I really apologise that I have only 3 minutes for you to answer that, but I'll try and give you it all.
Just firstly to say that we have a dedicated team. Every morning we have, at 7:30 in the morning, we get a list of all of the complaints that have come in. We have a dedicated team monitoring every single complaint that comes in so that we immediately pick up any case that relates to anybody under the age of 18. We do investigate, and we do have special procedures around interviewing children, and only staff with a certain level of specialist skills can interview children. Our general policy is to interview children with an advocate. Most often the complaints, children are either victims or they're witnesses to a crime. Most often those complaints are made by their parents. Occasionally they're made by a third party. And occasionally we have children who are in the care system, and that's where things get a little bit more complicated, where they may not be advocated.
For a child that's not in the care system, that is reporting an assault where their parent has made that assault, would it be normal to question them without a family member present?
It'd be normal to question them with an adult.
Okay.
And with an adult of their choosing.
Okay, and that's a choice that they have.
We do interact with advocacy organisations, because there are complainants who may not have the wherewithal or confidence to interact with us, so we're open to.
And then in terms
any
of those cases, but all cases, I suppose, are members of An Garda Síochána involved in the questioning of people who are reporting a crime, or is it only staff of GSOC that are involved in that questioning? We have had a cohort, internally we have a cohort of staff who have that expertise. We recently have had more numbers where we have had to go to people who have Garda expertise. In that situation, our staff will sit in the interview and will supervise to ensure that we're satisfied that there's an independence of questioning of the child in that context. So we still have primacy, as it's called, where we are the oversight body for that investigation. Somebody who has been assaulted, and again go back to a child, any child, so somebody who's been assaulted by a guard may be in a situation where, as part of a GSOC investigation, they're being questioned in a room where there's a uniformed guard. No, they wouldn't be uniformed. We would have that conversation with the child. Just to be clear. I'm not clear why the body who the complaint is being made about are in any way involved in the questioning process. It's just. I understand your question. It's more, I suppose,
to be clear to you that in the context of a Section 2 or Section 3 assault, when a young person has been assaulted, it's really important, and Judge McCabe made the point earlier, that the rigour of our investigation is what will stand up in court. So if we're going to do our job properly, the investigation must be rigorous. We must be able to withstand the kind of questioning from a defence lawyer in a court. So anything that we do has to have that rigour. If we have the internal capacity, if our investigators have that level of expertise, that's our preference. On the occasion when it doesn't happen, yes, there are guards there, but we as an independent oversight body will be supervising that entire process.
These are not uniformed guards. These are guards from Specialist Protective Services who are trained explicitly on this material.
But they're members of Garda Síochána,
yes.
not members.
Yeah.
Chair, I know I've completely run out of time, but perhaps if there's specific work or research that you've done that you can share with myself or members of the committee around children and patterns of violence around children, I would very much appreciate it. If you.
It's something that we're specifically working on.
Okay, thank you. Okay.